I guess what sort of surprised me in a sense is that we'd had this huge crisis that the mainstream absolutely didn't predict. It has gone on for years, which the mainstream absolutely didn't predict. I would have thought this would have been a basis for a fundamental rethink about what we used to think we believed, okay? But it hasn't happened. I mean, what's happened is that the policies that we followed, on the monetary side at least, since 2007, are just more of the same, ostensibly demand-stimulating policies that we've been following, I think, erroneously for the last 30 years. So far from having said, gee whiz, we've got to think this one through right from the basics, it's just more of the same. And I found that worrisome. Daniel Kahneman, by the way, you know, the Nobel Prize winner, the psychologist, he contends, and I think it's in his book, but I can't remember, but he contends that in fact this is absolutely part of human nature. It's not just central bankers. That whenever people are confronted with stuff that really challenges them, and they said, how did that happen? I never expected it. What they do, far from questioning it, is they retreat into the old belief system. And this seems to be a trait of human nature, according to Kahneman. So that the Germans basically believe the only thing to worry about is hyperinflation, and that originally comes out of too big government deficits. So now we got to stop all that, and that's what they're doing. And of course, in the United States, fundamental problem is deflation and the Great Depression, and we've got to stop all that, and that's what we're doing. So it's sort of a bit surprising and worrisome, but I think there's an element of truth in it. When I started at the Bank of England in 1969, my 3 years there were leading up to some really, really big changes in the UK where they were sort of deregulating, and they had this thing called competition and credit control. And so that was huge change for them, and it ended up badly. And then I went to the Bank of Canada, and they'd just given up on the fixed exchange rate system because that was working badly. So then we had a floating rate system, and the question is, what was to be the domestic anchor? And so they started off by saying, well, we'll focus on the unemployment rate, almost like you're doing in the States today, okay? And that worked out very badly because it turned out that the unemployment rate was shifting downwards because of changes in the unemployment insurance and stuff, and we didn't pick it up, and that ended badly. So then we went to monetarism, set targets for the money supply. That ended badly. And so it continues. I mean, I guess the point that I want to make here is that our understanding of how this complex adaptive system works is actually very limited. The other thing that I worry about, I just had a small part of my paper was about this, but I've become more and more concerned about it since, which is the distributional aspects of all of this, and I think you were alluding to that. And on the basis of my reading, I mean, it seems to me that what's happening with these very low rates is that it's helping the poorest, if you want to put it that way, who are people who got debts but very few assets. Okay, so the lower interest rate is good for them. It also helps the rich people who are the ones most engaged in speculation. So they're borrowing at very low interest rates, leveraging themselves up and buying those assets whose prices have gone through the roof, as we were talking about a few moments ago. So these people are coming out of this gangbusters. And who's getting hammered in the middle? It's the middle classes who got some financial assets and whose assets are significantly greater than their liabilities. But these are people who are essentially, the risk avoiders, okay, guys like me, where the money's essentially in the bank or in some sort of riskless form. And there, of course, the rates of return that they're getting are very, very low. And anybody who's a debtor, okay, on the other side of this equation, anybody who's a debtor is actually doing very well at the expense of the creditors. And that's a form of repression because the government, of course, is the biggest debtor of them all.